Day number 5, the final day of the 6th Invitational 2022 group stage just went down. Everybody played except for Team 1, Ninjas in Pajamas, Liquid, and BDS. They have their bye day today. And the first match we're going to talk about here is Sonics versus Eminem. Alright, first game of the day, Sonics versus Eminem, and the first game of the day being an important factor of this one because if you're an Eminem player, this was just way too early for you. You can't play at 10 a.m. You just choke. You can't handle it. Yeah, I think some of them were saying that they were not used to playing at 10 a.m. and affected their gameplay, but I mean, whatever went down, Sonics took an easy 2-0 over them. Not the easiest of 2-0s, especially as we'll see in I think it's the next game, or at least the games coming up. And all right, 55% of the community thought Sonics would take it down, and they did get it correct, 2-0, 7-5 and 7-2. So Eminem managed to keep it pretty close on Oregon, and then they sort of fell apart on Clubhouse. And these are just two good maps for Sonics. I can't really speak to Eminem. I would assume that they're fairly good maps for them if they let it go through the ban phase, but I suppose you only get actually the one ban before you do the first picks. Okay, so just doing the round breakdown. Here's Oregon. Sonics get off to a little bit of an early lead with 2 rounds on defense. Eminem takes 1, Sonics, Eminem, and Eminem 3-3 half. That's getting more and more standard by the day, it would seem, for pretty much every map. And Eminem takes another round once they switch sides. They're going up 4-3. Sonics take 2 more to take the lead back. Tie it up 5-5 with an Eminem round, and Sonics take 2 more to secure the game 7-5. No overtime required. And then when we go into Clubhouse, Eminem take the first round, but then Sonics dominate. We see 5 in a row, and Eminem answers back with 1, and Sonics take 2 more on their attacking side to close things out. And if we take a look at the stats here, Eminem got pretty well tossed. I guess Solotov went positive, and then Neo all the way down here with half the rating of Solotov. And you really like to see it for the Sonics, very tightly clustered from top to bottom, just a little bit over of a 0.2 difference from the top to the bottom. And you also like to see Kansan on top. It's been Grixer and Rexon, I think, in every single game on top in terms of rating. And I want to say it was Grixer twice and Rexon once. And so Yeti getting up there, Kansan and Super not too far behind as well. And all right, that's that game. Let's move on to the next. Empire versus Sandbox, the biggest slaughter of the tournament. About 4/5 of people voted for Empire, and that leaves 1/5 of the people for Sandbox. And if these were actual Sandbox fans and not just Sandbox believers, then they certainly had their hearts broken in this match. Let's take a look. 7-2, 7-0. So I think Navi only got 3 rounds against Oxygen, and Sandbox only got 3 rounds against Sonics. But now Sandbox only gets 2 rounds against Empire, and they get 7-0'd for the second time in a row on Oregon. Sonics did the same thing to them, and now Empire does it to them again. So I mean, 7-2. This one, there's no point in looking at it. It's all just Empire rounds. So Empire takes 1, Sandbox trades back. It looked like it might be a pretty standard series, but then Empire gets a ton of rounds. They go all the way up to match point, and then Sandbox gets a round for themselves, putting them up to 2, but that'll be the last round that they win in this series. Empire wins another round to take it 7-2, and then wins 7 in a row on Oregon to take them down. Empire was on the defensive side to start, so once again, maybe Sandbox could have got a few rounds on the board if they had started on defense, but based on how things went, I'm sure they would have still lost the map regardless. And looking at the stats, man, have you ever seen this? I don't think I've ever seen a 0 rating in a non-best of 1 series. I've seen like 2 or 3, I think, in best of 1 series, but in a best of 3 over the course of more than 1 map, I've never seen it. That's insane. It's terribly unfortunate. I guess this guy Nova is retiring from play to become a coach, and so that's a pretty rough way to go out. No entry kills, some entry deaths, a bunch of deaths, no kills. 6% cost, so I guess they maybe got traded in 1 round or survived. Did they survive 1 round? How many rounds were there? There were 16 rounds. No, did not survive a single round. And oh yeah, I guess I could have checked that just right here with survival rate. 0 KPR. Yeah, that's just tough. And then I mean, everybody got smashed. Just the rest of the players smashed a little bit less hard. And then we see Joystick. I think this is the strongest performance of any player in a series that we've seen in the tournament. I think Grixer, Ness, Squiggy Man have all had some pretty crazy performances, but 1.89, pretty close to 2. Insane. Plus 19, almost a 5 KD, 4 entry KD, almost a flawless cost, 1.5 KPR. Yeah, just this was a destruction the likes of which we have not seen. Well, certainly not in this tournament, but I don't know when the last time we saw anything like this was, just even outside this tournament. And all right, let's go to the next game now. Navi versus Damon Kia. This is one of the most overwhelming, if not the most overwhelming community prediction we've seen. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we've seen one that's 90% plus for one of the teams, but I can't recall if we have for certain. And well, it didn't end up being wrong, but Navi was the only team that could take a map off of Damon. And maybe this had to do with Damon. As I mentioned in the previous video, perhaps they were pulling their punches because they were already secured first place. The result of this game did matter for Navi, but it didn't matter for Damon in any tangible way. They could play their hearts out if they wanted to maintain their perfect record, which they didn't do in the end. They did in terms of match wins, but not in terms of map wins. And well, if they did play their hearts out, then they probably are giving other teams just a little bit more useful VOD on them. So a little bit of a trade-off, and it's unclear how hard they were actually playing, because Navi looked pretty poor to start with, but they've been on a pretty steady climb, and this being one of their crowning achievements thus far, I guess, you know, not even that impressive. They still did lose this series, but again, the only one to take a map off of them. So let's take a look at how things went down here. All right, so Chalet 8-6, Clubhouse 8-7, and Villa 7-5. So pretty close maps all around. Only one round separated Navi from Damon on Clubhouse, but you know, they were fairly close to taking either of the other two maps as well. So had things gone just a little bit differently, it could have been a Navi, a 2-0, a 2-1, whatever. It could have been a Navi win, and it also could have been a Damon 2-0 just as well, I suppose. All right, so on Chalet, Damon gets 4 rounds in a row. Finally, Navi gets one, and then Damon gets a round for a 5-1 attacking half on Chalet. So again, in the past, Chalet was attacker-sided, but yesterday, I think it was, we saw a couple of really defender-sided Chalets, and I guess that was maybe just a fluke. We'll have to see at the end of when we look at the map stats at the very end, if it ended up being attacker or defender-sided at the end of the group stage. And well, we go to overtime, so Navi runs it back up themselves. They get 3 in a row, and then Damon puts themselves on the match point. Navi needs 2 more rounds, which they do secure, but then when we go to overtime, Damon just wins 2 rounds, don't even need all 15. They win a defense and an attack, which breaks the mold just a little bit. And then we go to Clubhouse. So Rin gets a really big clutch in this first round, a 3K defuse, a 1v3 3K defuse. Okay. And then Navi answers back with 2 rounds, but 3 rounds go to Damon for a 4-2 defensive half on Clubhouse. Damon gets 1 more, going up 5-2, but then Navi answers back with 4 of their own, putting themselves on the match point. Damon answers back, takes them to overtime. And then a Navi round, a Damon round, and a Navi round. So Clubhouse was pretty attacker-sided after, what, the 3rd day is the first time I looked at it. And then after the 4th day, it was right around even, and it might be back into being defender-sided once again, with this map being part of that. But then I suppose probably other teams played on it and influenced it. We'll have to see at the end. And we did see 11 out of the 15 rounds being played go to the defenders. Finally, on Villa, Damon, Navi, and then 3 more for Damon. This is similar, if not identical, to Clubhouse. It's a 4-2 defensive half for Damon anyways. And then we see Navi with 3 of their own. It's looking pretty good, a full rotation, but then Damon shuts them down. They get 3 attacks of their own to just close down this best of 3 without having to go to overtime on the final map. And it actually ends with a little Yas 1v1 clutch. Perhaps this is signatory of things to come. Yas really heating up here, as you can see. Finally, he topped his team. He got that little 1v1 clutch. Maybe that means he is absolutely switched on, ready to roll in the bracket. We'll have to find out. Woogie Man, I think, was the top of his team in all the other matches, ended up being 2nd place. And the stats look pretty unimpressive all across the board. Of course, nobody even getting up to a 1.2 rating. And then I suppose most of the ratings aren't that low. Secretly's rating is a decent bit down there, and Katsing is kind of low. But besides that, fairly close to 1.0 for the other 6 players. And right, that was Damon versus Navi. Navi is now the only team to have taken a map off of Damon, which, I mean, maybe that stings a little bit, but I mean, it doesn't. I'm sure they won't let it get to them. Maybe they will. Who's to really say? And this also sets up a whole mini league thing, I think, in this group, which we'll talk about at the end. It's sort of controversial. And because of the result of the next game I'm going to talk about, Navi needed that map to survive. So if that round if that last round of the second map had gone to Damon instead, if Damon had won the series 2-0, it would be Navi being eliminated from this group rather than Team 1, who is actually the one that gets eliminated. All right, let's talk about that other game now. Oxygen versus MIBR. So at the beginning of the day, Team 1 was second place in their group, the same group as Oxygen, MIBR, Navi, and Damwon. But they had already played all 4 of their matches. Everyone else in the group was still playing one more, of course, the game that I just talked about, and then this game here, Oxygen versus MIBR. And because of the number of points that Oxygen and MIBR and Navi were on, they were all just below Team 1. MIBR was 1 point behind them, but had the head-to-head, so 1 more point would put them ahead of them in the standings, and Oxygen and Navi were on the same number of points as Team 1, but had the losing head-to-head against them, so they also just needed 1 point to pass them in the standing. So in order for Team 1 to be knocked out, you needed Navi to get at least 1 point, and then Oxygen and MIBR also to each get at least 1 point. And so that's exactly what happened. So Navi won that second map, and then after Oxygen and MIBR each won a map in the series, it was Oxygen and then MIBR that knocked out Team 1. And we'll talk about it more when we look at the standings at the end, but there's been a lot of controversy on the topic, and we'll talk about it later. So most of the people thought that Oxygen was going to take it, and they were incorrect. So Oxygen's definitely been on a decline after that initial Navi stomp that they pulled off, and they lost to Damon since then, and they've also lost to Team 1, right? So they're not looking too good, and that's part of the reason why the whole controversy thing arises. We'll see it at the end. And okay, right. So MIBR surprised the community, I suppose. Not the most surprising result ever, based on the trajectory things had been going. So right, 7-5, 7-3, 7-4. Oxygen's famous Oregon, they do end up taking it. MIBR, and then Oxygen answers back with 3, but MIBR and Oxygen, so a 4-2 attacking half for Oxygen, solid. And then Oxygen gets 1 more round to go up 5-2. MIBR answers back with 3 to tie it up 5-5. Oxygen gets 2 rounds at the end to close it out without going to overtime. And then on Bank, they sort of got dominated. They beat Navi. I don't know what was the score. It was 7-1 or it was 7-2, right? Because those were the 2 scores. So Oxygen destroyed Navi on this map, and then they themselves got destroyed, not quite as badly, but almost as badly. So MIBR 3-4 rounds in a row, and then finally Oxygen gets a couple rounds. And I think Bank at this point is the most attacker sided, so you need to be getting at least 3 attacking wins, if not 4 or 5. To be in a good position. But then they do get the first defensive round, but then MIBR get just 3 more to close out the map. We see a big 1v2 clutch here from Lukid, and then finally on the final map we see a couple Oxygen rounds and then 3 MIBR rounds, 1 for Oxygen, 3 half, MIBR Oxygen, MIBR, 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 so 3 in a row, and they close it out 7-4. Don't even need to go 12 rounds. So good win for MIBR, and kind of a bad loss for Oxygen, right? Yeah, high hopes for them after their first match, but the hopes have diminished a bit. We'll have to see how they can actually perform once they get into bracket. NA as a whole seems to be cursed with some pretty bad choking habits at the moment. Not all of them have choked every game, but we've seen several chokes from several NA teams so far. Falls and Reduct with good scores, and everyone positive on MIBR, and then only Kino really doing well on Oxygen, with none of these players doing really, really badly, but none of them doing especially well. And all right, let's move on to the next game. Elevate versus TSM. So 88% for TSM, 1% more than Damon got in their poll for their match against Navi earlier, and so maybe this is the most decisive. Again, I can't recall if we had like a 90% or more vote for one of the teams. And Elevate shocks. Maybe this is a bit inflated because it is TSM. They get just an abnormal number of votes, even though they're a good team. But still, based on the way things have gone, maybe they were given a little bit too much stock. All right, so how did Elevate do it? They did it in 7-5, 8-7 fashion, so pretty close. TSM was fairly close to taking either of these maps, especially the Oregon, but 2-0 for Elevate. You gotta respect them. They talked about before, when they were doing the interview and they were showing it on stream at various times, it was Onigiri was talking about that nobody would scrim against them when they arrived at SI for whatever reason. He didn't say why, but So then they had to just go practice in ranked, and that's a tough fate. So a couple of rounds for TSM, one back for Elevate. TSM elevates, Elevate TSM, and then Elevate gets 3 in a row, putting them on match point. TSM gets one more, but they need another one after that, which they do not get. Elevate wins this map 7-5. And then when we go to Oregon, we see Elevate 2 by TSM, 1 for Elevate, 2 by TSM, so a 4-2 defensive half for TSM. They get one more to go up 5-2, looking pretty good. But then we see Elevate with 4 in a row, putting them on the match point. TSM takes it to overtime, and then we see Elevate, TSM, Elevate. So very defender-sided Oregon here, 11 out of 15 rounds, and actually a defender-sided Bank as well, 7 out of the 12 rounds, so only slightly defender-sided, but still. It is a bit strange for Bank, and not especially strange for Oregon. And if we look at the stats here, Onigiri on top, Napew not far behind, DCH and Nerix on identical ratings, and then Sapper just a little ways down. Merc with a very high rating, especially compared to the rest of his team. He was really popping off, 5-1 on the entry, plus 11 on KD. Nice cost, KPR, all of this stuff. Low survival rate, but I mean, yeah. So is the rest of his team on average. Bolo achieved Chala Geo, not too low below 1, but I mean, besides Geo, I suppose. So again, close maps, but it was a 2-0, so it is a decisive result in terms of points, and we'll move on to the next game. Dark Zero versus Furia, and the line drawn in the sand goes right down the middle, 50-50. This is at least the second one of these we've seen. We saw one like yesterday or the day before, and we've also seen one more that was, what, 51-49 or something, so it seemed like, based on the prediction, this should be a banger match, and it was. This was probably one of the more tense and intense matches that we've seen thus far in the group stage, and one of the closest ones. Ended up going in the favor of Furia, but just barely. These two teams have some history. They played each other at SI in the group stage. Dark Zero beat Furia 7-3 in the one best of one that they played, and then when they played each other in the bracket, Furia ended up beating Dark Zero. I think it was 8-6, 7-2, or 7-3. It was something like that. And so, yeah, even though Dark Zero took them down in the group stage pretty easily, Furia eliminated Dark Zero from the bracket pretty easily. So, you know, a little bit of revenge for Dark Zero would have been nice, but they don't end up getting it. Furia increases their lifetime win count on Dark Zero. And Dark Zero is kind of a different looking team. Back then, I think they still had Mint and Skies and one other player. I don't think NJR was on the roster yet. Definitely Pambazoo and Canadian weren't yet. So I think Hyper and Eclipse are the only remnants of the roster from just 9 months ago. And as far as I remember, I think Furia is the same roster. Okay, let's look at how the maps went. So starting with Cafe here, as you can see, 8-6, 7-5, 8-7. So this might be the closest series. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think we ever saw any triple overtime. We've seen several series that had 2 overtime maps, but I'm not sure if there was anything closer than this. The only way it could have been closer than this, I guess, without triple overtime is if there was an 8-7, 8-7, 7-5, which I don't think so. So I think this might be tied for the closest series overall. Okay, right. And getting into Cafe here, it starts out with a trade in the very first round, and it says a tie, but it gives the round to Furia because they were on defense and the bomb wasn't planted. Miracle clutches 0-1v2. And then Dark Zero gets a round and another round, putting them 2-1. Furia gets a round for a 2-2. Dark Zero get 2 more for a 4-2. And if this first round had gone in their favor, it would have been a 5-1. So looking pretty good for Dark Zero to start with. They get Furia gets a round, putting it 4-3. Dark Zero 5-3. Furia, Dark Zero on match point. Furia, 2 rounds to put them into overtime, and then Dark Zero cleans up with 2 rounds. So it's looking like a close affair, which it generally is with Furia. They against solid teams, they usually keep it pretty close. And well, Dark Zero does take this one, but we go to Clubhouse next, and it starts out with Furia getting 3 in a row. Dark Zero, Furia, Dark Zero, so that's 4-2 for Furia. Furia even gets 1 more for a 5-2, and then Dark Zero gets a couple of their own. Furia, Dark Zero, and that is 6-5 up Furia, but Furia secures it. They win 7-5 off the back of a 1v3 clutch by Lenda. Very nice. And then we go to the third and final map. 15 rounds is what it's going to require. Furia, Dark Zero, Furia, Furia, Dark Zero, Dark Zero. And then Dark Zero takes the lead, but Furia takes the lead right back. They're up 5-4. Dark Zero takes it to a tie once again, 5-5. 1 round for each of them takes it to overtime. And then Furia, Dark Zero, and Furia wins round 15. So I guess fortunate for Furia that they were on the defense in overtime. It didn't end up being that defender-sided as far as Oregon went on the day, but still 9 out of 15 rounds did go to the defenders, only 6 for the attackers. And I guess on Clubhouse, it was a little bit more attacker-sided, and then on Cafe, also more attacker-sided. So Oregon did break the trend for the match at large. And finally, let's just glance at the stats. This is incredibly close. It's been a minute since I've seen something like this. You know, only 0.06 separating the top from the bottom. Everyone just right in here. Even KD, the best +2 and the worst -2. And then if we look over at Dark Zero, it's not very tightly clustered. We see Pambazoo kind of popping off, and NJR continues to be quite good. Definitely the best player for his team overall in the tournament thus far. Hyper has improved. He has like a 0.88 rating before today, and this doesn't help it that much, but it looked like it was going to help it quite a lot. He was really doing well in the first map, and then he fell off a little bit, and it looks like he fell off overall in the series, only going slightly positive on kills. And then Canadian and Eclipse a little bit below 1, and well, just Dark Zero was so close, but they didn't end up taking it. It didn't really matter for them once they went to the third map, though. They kind of needed to win this series 2-0 to put themselves in a really good position in the group. And I think that does that for this match. Let's look at the next. FaZe versus Cyclops. We see another really decisive community prediction here. Not as decisive as a few we just saw earlier, but still really decisive. And FaZe end up taking it. Not a 2-0 like the community prediction might suggest, but still FaZe do take it in the end. Cyclops ends up as the only team in the tournament to not have a series win, and they are also the team with the fewest number of points in any group besides Sandbox, who had the same number. They each had 2. Cyclops got 1 point in this series and then 1 point in another series. And then Sandbox got 2 points in one series against the Ninjas in Pajamas, and then no points in any other series. So 2 points for each of them. Which one was the inferior team at the end of the day? I mean, I guess based on just the win percentage, the series win percentage, you'd probably say Cyclops, but I do think that they had a tougher group, and Sandbox, I guess, just got lucky that they fought Ninjas in Pajamas first, because Ninjas in Pajamas woke up after that and ended up topping their group. So I think Sandbox probably put up the worst performance, especially after their absolute destruction in this last day, and Cyclops had some really good performances. That just unfortunate that they got put in this particular group. All right, so going on to Chalet here. Flashbacks for Cyclops. I'm sure they just played against SSG yesterday, and they had numerous chances to close out the map, and they could not do it, but they do end up doing it here. So Cyclops gets 2 rounds on defense, FaZe gets a round, Cyclops gets a round, 2 more for FaZe, ends up 3-3, and now we see Cyclops going on to the attack, and Cyclops gets 3 in a row. So 3 chances here to close out without going to overtime. They fail the first one, and then they do get the next one, so they win at 7-4. Versus SSG, they were up 6-1, so they had 5 chances to win the map without going to overtime, and they could not do it. SSG brought it back to 6-6 and then won the map 8-6. So I mean, that one might be haunting them, but they got a little bit of redemption here at least. And then if we look at Villa, if FaZe gets the first round, Cyclops gets another round, and then we see 6 in a row for FaZe to close it out. And at that point, Cyclops was out of the tournament. They still have another map to play, I guess, but this was pretty well meaningless. The only way that they could get out of last place was by getting all 3 points by winning this match 2-0, because they're on 1 point. FaZe was on 4 points, so they needed 3 points to catch up to FaZe, and then they would have had the head-to-head against them as well. And then also, if Rogue didn't get any more points because they were on 3, they would have been above Rogue. But still, just a 2-0 win here would have guaranteed them above FaZe, and then maybe FaZe could have been eliminated. But as we'll see in the next series, Rogue don't end up getting points. So had they won Villa, which they weren't actually close to doing at all, but if they had, then they would be in the upper bracket rather than eliminated from the tournament. Kind of crazy to see. And let me run through Cafe as well. Cyclops gets 3 in a row, so it looks like maybe they'll win this very last meaningless map, but we see 2 back from FaZe and 1 more for Cyclops. And then FaZe runs up 5 in a row and just doesn't let Cyclops breathe anymore. I'm sure even if they didn't really need this last map, that FaZe was happy to end the group stage on a high note. And so let's take a look at the stats. And we see Black Ray on top once again. I think on average he was their best performer, and maybe by far. I think 2 of these Cyclops players in this tournament had like really bad stats. It might have been Suzuki and Gatorada. I don't remember which 2 it was. I don't think it was Gator. I think it was 2 of the other 3. But regardless, we see Gatorada suffering here, 0.5 KD, just getting a bit blown away. It happens at times. And on the other end of things, we see Astro popping off. He did this in another map as well. He might be their top performer throughout the tournament thus far, and I think probably based on the fact that his stats are really high here, and then also that other match that I'm thinking of. And then we see everyone else putting up pretty average performances. Cameraman doing, you know, decently well, and Soul's just a little bit below a 1.0. And that's that match. Let's take a look at the last one of the day and the last one of the group stage even. SSG versus Rogue, another prediction, this one being just under 80%, but still being very decisive. And it looked like Rogue was going to take either of the maps at different points, but they end up taking none of the maps. Space Station wins this one 2-0, and they win both of them 7-5, so it's what you might call a close 2-0, but could have been closer, of course. Right, on Coastline here, we see Space Station get 2 rounds in a row, but then we see Rogue with 4 in a row. Space Station finally get one of their own, and then one for Rogue, but then we see Space Station with another 4 streak to match Rogue's 4-win streak that we saw over here. So yeah, I mean, they just stopped Rogue in their tracks. They didn't let them get onto match point, and they took them down on Coastline. And then we go to Clubhouse, which seems to be SSG's best map once again. They've done pretty well on it in this tournament, and of course, if you remember back in the day, they were like unstoppable. They had a really big win streak over a really massive amount of time. A lot of action in the first round. Rogue ends up winning it. Rogue actually rushed in the first 2 rounds, and it worked both times. One was a basement rush, and the other one was a cache CCTV rush. And they both ended up being fairly close. This one involving a 1v2 clutch by Cryan, but again, Rogue does win them both. And then we see Space Station answer back with 3. Rogue gets 1 to make it a 3-3 half, and then another action-packed round here. Bosco clutches the 1v1, and Space Station get the round, 1 for Rogue to tie it up 4-4. Space Station Rogue for a 5-5, and then Space Station just gets the last 2 rounds, closing it out 7-5, just like the previous map. And we'll take a look at the stats. So Rampy on top, he was doing pretty well this series, just like the rest of his team. Finally, we see Bosco not on the bottom. It was a good series for him. He had that one round where he got that big clutch, and we did see a 1vx coming out from Rampy as well. 6 plants from Skies, and then Fultz on the bottom, but still having fine stats. Then if we move over here, we do see Prano, the Smoke Thermite main on top. And then Cryan did fine, Leon and Aces did all right. And then Rips just suffering once again. I don't know, just for some reason, this guy cannot perform at this tournament. It's been really, really brutal for him. And okay, that was the last match of the group stage. And so we'll look at the standings and maybe talk about a few more things, look at some stats, and that'll be it. In Group A, we see Team Empire end up at the top, Ninjas in Pajamas at 2nd, Sonics at 3rd, Eminem 4th, and Sandbox last place. This means Sandbox is eliminated. Eminem will go into the losers bracket. Ninjas in Pajamas and Sonics will go to the first round of the upper bracket, and Team Empire will go to the second round of the upper bracket. I think this is pretty much the expected result for this group. If you predicted how this group was going to go before the tournament started, this is pretty well what you predict. Maybe you switch Ninjas in Pajamas and Empire, and maybe you switch Sonics and Eminem. But besides that, yeah, I'd say most people would have Sandbox in last, and then again, you know, these two, the top 2, and then these 2, the 3rd and 4th in some order. So not too crazy here. It was a fairly tight group outside of last place, you know, 8 points, 7 points, 7 points, 6 points, and then Sandbox down here at 2. I want to say that Sandbox was probably the least impressive team in this tournament. They did get a 2-1 victory over Ninjas in Pajamas, but for some reason Ninjas in Pajamas just started out really slow. They ended up 2nd place in their group, and you know, so just 1 point behind Team Empire. And maybe if Sandbox had played Ninjas on a different day, then that would have been a different result. They got 2-0 in all their other series. The only other team that they're in competition with for the worst team seems to be Cyclops. I suppose you could maybe say Rogue and BDS, each of them only have 3 points, whereas Sandbox and Cyclops each have 2, so it's fairly close, but BDS has a pretty big excuse, and Rogue was playing in the strongest group. So was Cyclops, and that's why I want to maybe give Cyclops the nod over Sandbox, despite the fact that Sandbox actually has a match win, and Cyclops doesn't have a match win. They were playing against, I'd say, on average, a decent bit tougher level of opponent than this group. Not to say this group was bad or slouches or anything, but I just think that that other group was a little bit stronger. So I'll give the nod to Cyclops, and well, these guys end up with -26, and Cyclops is -25, so it's very close there. Both of them 2 points. Cyclops loses one more map, but they both win the same number of maps. It's hard to call. I mean, if you have a strong opinion on it, I guess you can voice that opinion down below. And I think that pretty much covers everything in Group A. This isn't a very complicated or terribly interesting group to look at. Let's move on to Group B. Group B, the group of death, ended up being the most definitive group in terms of its results. We see a pretty wide gap between each of the teams for the most part. 3 points between Liquid and SSG, 2 points between SSG and FaZe, 3 points between FaZe and Rogue, and then just 1 point between Rogue and Cyclops. But even if Cyclops had got one more point, then Cyclops would have still been below Rogue based on the head-to-head. Rogue beat Cyclops just like everybody defeated Cyclops, because of course they did not end up getting a win. That's tough. You know, maybe things would have gone different for them if they had happened to have been placed in another group. So Liquid ended up being the second most dominant team of the group stage, easily the most dominant in this group. Damon Kia ended on the same map count as them. They both ended 8-1, same record, same points. Damon Kia went plus 23. They had one more round win and one fewer round loss, so very tight affair. We'll have to see how their matchup goes if and when they end up playing. Of course, if they just keep beating everyone else, they're going to end up playing each other. That'll be definitely one to watch out for. Space Station in second, FaZe in third. That puts both of them in the upper bracket. And I don't actually know how they are deciding who gets to pick, in what order they get to pick. The second place teams all get to pick their opponent from the third seeds, and they cannot pick from their own group. So Space Station gets to pick from what it would be, not FaZe, but Sonics, TSM, and what's the other one? Navi. And I'm assuming they get to pick first, because I would guess that the points is the first decider. Space Station has the most points of any second place team. They have 8, and NIP has 7, Elevate has 7, and Oxygen has 5. So I would imagine Oxygen picks last, aka doesn't pick, because there will only be one team left for them to play against, because the other ones will have been picked. And then I don't know who gets to pick first out of Elevate and NIP, because they're both on 7 points, but that remains to be seen. I think that they said they're doing the drawing tomorrow at 10 Central European time, which would be 4 a.m. Eastern and 1 a.m. Pacific. So not actually that long from when I'm recording this part of the video, but they'll do that draw and decision and all this stuff, and we should know the bracket. So I mean, most people probably, if you're in the Western Hemisphere, won't wake up early just to watch that draw, and you'll wake up and you'll find out the information, I would imagine. And we'll have to see. I would guess Space Station wants to play against Navi more than anyone else, but I mean, I can't say for certain. Maybe they want to play against TSM, maybe they want to play against Sonics. I don't know who they want to play against. They cannot play against FaZe, but also probably FaZe is the one they want to play against the least. But they did beat them, so who really knows. Rogue got, kind of close. If a couple of their games, matches, maps, whatever had gone a little bit differently, maybe they'd be in third place, but still a pretty definitive 3-point gap here. Puts them into the losers bracket, but they are still alive in the tournament. And I guess that does it for this group. Let's move on to Group C. Group C was definitely a surprising one, although it's not that surprising if you had known about the whole BDS thing at a time, or I guess as soon as you learned that BDS would have to play with their coach. Before you knew that information, I'm sure most people would have had BDS at the top of the group, maybe TSM, maybe Furia, but I imagine most people would have had BDS up there at the top and certainly not at the bottom. So Furia topping the group under the circumstances isn't that surprising. It could have maybe been TSM as the favorite, but it was Furia in the end. So we see a little bit of a tie here. Elevate has the head-to-head over TSM, so that puts them in second rather than third, but both of them will still go into the first round of the upper bracket, with Furia getting that first round bye. Dark Zero going into the losers bracket immediately. If Dark Zero had started out their tournament playing like they did toward the end of the group stage, then probably they'd be in first, second, or third place, but that was not the situation. And when we get into the last group, there's going to be a whole mini league situation, and there's a hypothetical one I want to talk about first here. So if Furia had not won that last map, so they just had one fewer point and Dark Zero had one more point, of course Dark Zero would still be below these 3 points. Furia, Elevate, TSM would all be on 7, Dark Zero would be on 6, but there would be a 3-way tie among Furia, Elevate, and TSM. So what would happen then? A mini league situation would trigger, and the first tiebreaker is you see how many points each of these teams have gotten among their matchups. So you look at just how many points Furia got versus Elevate and TSM, how many points Elevate got versus Furia and TSM, and how many points TSM got versus Furia and Elevate. And what you would find is that each of them got 3 points. They all 2-0'd another team here. So TSM 2-0'd Furia, Furia 2-0'd Elevate, Elevate 2-0'd TSM. So it's a tie there. You then look at round differential within the mini league, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's Furia having the best round differential, so that puts them in first place. And then I believe the way it works is since Elevate has the win over TSM, I think that puts them in second and TSM in last, even though if I remember right, Elevate has the worst round differential. So the round differential determines the top team, and then you go in the order that the teams beat each other. So if Furious put it first, then the team that they beat will go into second, so that the team that the second place team beat will go into last. I hope that wasn't terribly confusing. It might have been, but so all of this to say that even if Furia had got 1 fewer point, I believe it would have been the exact same. Definitely Furia would have been first place still, but I'm not 100% sure if it would have been Elevate or TSM in second. But I think it would have been Elevate. Okay. Right, that's all that aside there, and there's also some other scenarios. If Dark Zero had just 2-0'd Furia, then Dark Zero would be the one on 7 points, and then it'd be a different mini league, but I don't know the information for that one off the top of my head, so we're just not going to talk about it, and we'll go to the last group where we do have another mini league to talk about and a bit of controversy to discuss as well. All right, let's check it out. Group D, the group of Damon. So everything was really, really close, of course, except for Damon being head and shoulders above everyone else, a whole 6-point gap. But then we see 3 teams on 5 points and 1 team on 4 points. So going into today, Team 1 was in second place. They had 4 points along with Oxygen and Navi. They also had 4, but Team 1 had the head-to-head, so they were above them. And then MIBR was at 3 points at the beginning of the day, putting them at the bottom of the standings. Team 1 was destined to be passed by at least 1 team, but under various scenarios, they'd be passed by 2 or 3 teams as well, and it indeed was 3 points. So if Navi got any number of points, they would pass Team 1, and then MIBR and Oxygen each needed only 1 point apiece to pass them, and it's possible for them each to get at least 1, which is what happened. MIBR got 2, Oxygen got 1, and so that put all 3 of them above Team 1 and eliminated them. So what's the controversy about? It is this right here. So Oxygen won 1 match, Navi won 1 match, MIBR won 2 matches, Team 1 won 2 matches. So why is it that the teams that won 1 match apiece are ahead of 2 teams that won 2 matches apiece? Shouldn't it be MIBR and Team 1 in second and third in some order, and then Oxygen and Navi being in 4th and 5th place, with one of them going to the loser bracket and one of them being eliminated? Should that not be the case? Well, I mean, no, because right, there's like multiple levels to this discussion, and the first level to discuss, I suppose, is the fact that like these were the rules and everyone knew these were the rules coming in. I suppose some number of the spectators didn't know these were the rules, and maybe some of the players didn't know, but I mean, they were the rules. Like anybody who made themselves aware of them understood that what was important is not just winning your best of 3s, it is to win every map possible, because if you lose a map in a best of 3, you lose out on a point. So if you win 2-1, you only get 2 out of 3 points, whereas if you win 2-0, you get 3 points. So you're not exactly playing best of 3s in the same way that you would in the past, because in best of 3s and any other system that we had in the past, if you won 2-1, it was just as good as winning 2-0. I mean, you were maybe hurt your stats, you were a little bit more tired, whatever it was, but for all intents and purposes, it was just as good of a win. But now it counts against you if you do lose 1 map along the way, if you don't win 2-0. So you lose out on a point, your opponents get a point, and so there's only 1 point separating you, even though you won the 2 out of 3. And so there's a lot of schools of thinking on the matter, I suppose, and I think this made for a really good viewing experience. The way that it worked out, it did make a lot of the groups really close, but in terms of competitive integrity, it does sting a little bit indeed for MIBR and Team 1 to get knocked out when they technically won more of the series than Oxygen and Navi did. If we look at the maps, they all won the same number of maps. MIBR lost the fewest maps, so maybe that should put them at the top. Of course, once again, not in terms of the rules. Like, this is how things are ordered based on the rules, but in terms of what, you know, quote unquote, should have been or whatever. Looking at round differential, MIBR also has the best here. They got just dead even, whereas like Navi is minus 15. And then, yeah, just points put them in this correct order. And now we have this whole mini league thing to discuss. And right, I mean, I don't have too much of an opinion on it. I don't think this is the best possible format. I think maybe we should just go back to... We definitely shouldn't go back to best of ones. Best of threes are just superior for SI. I think we should stick with it. But maybe it should just be an all or nothing system where you get the full 3 points for winning and no points for losing. And at that point, it might as well just be 0 points versus 1 point, because it's the same thing at that point. But I saw somebody suggest maybe you give the winning team in the situation that a team wins 2-1 instead of 2-0, you give the winning team still 3 points, but you also give the losing team 1 point. I don't think that works out. I don't think it's sustainable. I think it has to be a zero-sum situation where any points given to the loser have to be taken from the winner. Maybe you recalculate points though. Maybe you give the winner in a 2-0, you give them 4 points, and the winner in a 2-1, you give them 3 points, and then the loser still 1 point. So it is still like a pretty noticeable difference. It's a difference of 2 points versus a difference of 1 point in this system. And you know, you could even do 4-1, or you could just change the number of points. Maybe it doesn't have to be 3 for a 2-0 and whatever. There's different ways to do it, and I mean, I guess if you have a strong opinion on the matter, feel free to voice it and for all to consider. But right, that's enough on that. Let's talk about the mini league. So these 3 teams all ended up on 0 points, or sorry, they all ended up on 5 points, putting them tied with each other in terms of points. So now we have to look at the head-to-head. This one isn't as complicated as the hypothetical one I was talking about for the previous group, because it is just determined by the points within the mini league. So once again, we're just going to see how many points each of these teams got against the other teams in the mini league. So we're looking at Oxygen, Navi, and MIBR. Oxygen won against Navi 2-0, so that's 3 points, and they lost to MIBR 2-1. So they got 1 point from that, bringing them to 4 points. Okay, Oxygen 4 points in the mini league. Navi lost to Oxygen 2-0, giving them 0 points, but they beat MIBR 2-0, giving them 3 points in the mini league. And MIBR lost to Navi 2-0, giving them 0 points, and they beat MIBR beat Oxygen 2-1, giving them 2 points. So that's 2 points total. So 4 for Oxygen, 3 for Navi, 2 for MIBR. That is what dictates that order there. And that's pretty much all there is to it. And I feel like if I talk about it anymore, I'm just going to keep talking in circles. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to look at the stats, and then we're going to call it a day. All right, sound good? Let's do it. All right, so these are the stats for SI 2022 at the end of the group stage. Of course, these are the leaderboards. We'll look at the full stats in just a second. So we have Nesk staying on top. He didn't actually play today, and nobody ended up passing him in any category. We have Grixer still pretty close in rating and pretty close in KD. Much closer than he was after yesterday. He was at or maybe not much closer. I think he was at plus 41 yesterday. Now he's at plus 46, so inching a little bit closer. And then Entry, Pambazoo, Merc got pretty close. They're only 2 behind Nesk. And then still nobody passed Palu. And I want to say somebody was at 77% before, so they fell down. Maybe it was Grixer. I don't recall who it was. Somebody fell down just a little bit, I think. Right, so clutches, we have Prano up here and Woogie Man, just the 2 clutch overlords of the tournament, and then Kansan, NJR, and Miracle with 4 apiece. And then there could be some other number of people on 4 as well, but they're getting cut off. And I guess we can just check really quickly. If we go to here, and then we go to 1vx. Yeah, oh no, it's just those are the definitive top 5. Back to the leaderboards, we have finally Plant. Skies took over the number 1 position, 16 Plant, and then we have Eclipse, Bride, Ask, and Super. And is there anybody tied with Super? I want to say that, yeah, we have Coded and Fox Day tied with Super, and for some reason he's just the one up on that board. And okay, so that's it for the leaderboards. We'll just look through the full thing here, right? Nesk still a decent bit above Grixer, who's a decent bit above Palu, who's a decent bit above Woogie Man, and then things start to get closer from there. So NJR now in top 5 position in the tournament. He's been super good, and we'll have to see if he can take Dark Zero any further than the first round of the loser bracket. Pino, Merc, Rexon, so on and so forth. Joystick brought his rating up quite a lot because he had an insane performance of the day. And speaking of, let's go to the bottom, because the person that he dealt out that magic onto was Nova in his squad. Nova was, I don't know, higher, but now because of his 0 rating for the day, he fell all the way to the bottom. Harper also down here. Before it was Rips, but now he has a couple of players below him, and these guys did get eliminated, so going forward, Rips is still the lowest rated player still in the tournament, and again, we'll see if he can go any further, just like I said for Dark Zero, because Rogue is also starting in that lower bracket. And I guess that's pretty much it for this, so let's just take a look at the map stats and close things out. Right, Oregon has turned pretty defender-sided. I don't know what the most defender-sided was on any given day, but at the end of the 5th day, it ends up being Oregon at 57%. Also the most played map, so this was Cafe for a while, but Oregon got more plays than Cafe, taking it to the #1 most played. Overall, 57%, almost 200 rounds played, so Meeting Hall Kitchen still better than Kitchen Dining. This is about the same percentage this was at. I think this might have fallen down slightly. I want to say it was at like 60. And then Dorms Kids is not that favored. I saw several teams going to Meeting Hall instead of Dorms. So I think that's a result of the whole frag grenade thing. They're especially lethal on Dorms. There's a lot of places you can nade from under. And then Laundry Supply continues to be really good. There's nowhere that you can breach above the site. It's all hard floor. Except for the hatches, I suppose, but other than that, there's no, you're not gonna buck or sledge anything into any of that. And then Cafe, everything pretty tightly clustered, a little bit below 50 here, a little bit above it, and then right around 50 for the overall and these 2 objectives, the 2 most played objectives. But Kitchen only played 1 fewer time than Reading Dining. Bar Cocktail is the most. I feel like that goes in and out. Maybe I feel like not too long ago, perhaps I might have seen Kitchen as #1, but maybe I'm misremembering that. Maybe it's still just been Bar Cocktail. And yeah, just a little bit of a gap there. 10 more plays than this, 1 more play than this, and then Mining Dining, not very favored, even though it's ended up as the most won in terms of percentage. Clubhouse finally goes back to a defensive sided. It was like 40%, and then it was like 49%, and now we're at 51%. Church Arsenal continues to be the most defended. These 2 went up quite a lot. They were both at like 30 something, or maybe even sub 30. But they're getting both pretty close to 50%, and then Bar Stage even, I think, maybe has gone up, but 31% now. Villa goes to defender side. The Living Library continues to be really bad. It was at 1 out of 10, now it's at 1 out of 11 in terms of success, and the other 3 above 50, and giving it a 52% overall. Makes sense for Villa. Bank, I think, went more defender sided, but not by much. It was at 40%, goes to 43, and everything is really, really similar. Each objective, based on these numbers, looks about just as good, but I mean, Teller's Archives, this number might change if it was played more, and maybe CEO Lounge as well. But super tight numbers, which is kind of nice to see. But maybe, I don't know, maybe you like to see more variety on a map than that. But this does mean they're all similarly defensible, so I do think it is cool to see. Maybe you want to see them slightly closer to 50, but they're not that far off. And it is nice to have some number of attacker-sided and some number of defender-sided maps in the pool. Right, Coastline, three objectives that are pretty attacker-sided, and then 1 that's pretty heavily defender-sided, although, again, only 12 plays, so 8 out of 12 times this has been successful. And then finally, we have Chalet, the least played map, only 9 plays on it, but it has gone defender-sided overall, so 51%, 52 on Bar, 48 on Kitchen Dining. Wine Cellar Snowmobile has turned into the strongest site. And again, maybe if it was played 42 times, this would go down slightly, but for some reason, teams are getting better at defending it, or maybe it really is just because teams are unfamiliar with attacking it, because it was never picked before. It was just so rarely picked because it was so bad, but so maybe it's just at the point in the cycle where teams don't know how to attack it, and once they figure it out, it'll go back down again. Who knows? But yeah, so I guess that does it for the group stage. If you watch through all 5 of these videos, that's actually kind of crazy, because it's like, what, 2.5 hours of, no, more, 3 hours of video or something, into whatever it is. Something kind of crazy. I'm really happy with how it's gone. The casting's been good. The production's been phenomenal. Like a handful of tech pauses here and there, but none that were super long from what I can remember. And the gameplay's been good, pretty competitive. A few surprises, and it seems like it's building up to a pretty good bracket. Hopefully we don't see any like super blowout, somebody just run away with the tournament, and hopefully some of the teams that look like they're improving maybe put up a good showing in the bracket, like Dark Zero, Navi, maybe Oxygen can turn things around. Liquid and Damon, you know, a grand final of those guys is something a lot of people like to see because they look like the best teams, and Damon victory I think a lot of people were rooting for, and just an APAC victory in general. But at this point, it's what, there are 2 APAC teams that got first seeds and 2 APAC teams that got eliminated, so big disparity there. I guess APAC continues to be top heavy. And right, so many other things that we could talk about, but I'll end it here. I'll probably have some sort of video on the off day as well. There's a chance this is going up on the off day. We'll see if I actually get it uploaded tonight. Yeah, that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.